Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Thursday, July 23rd. I'm Sarith Hawk. Viral food trends have made pistachios very popular, but farmers in the Central Valley say keeping up with demand is not so easy.
There was an unprecedented heat wave that took place right in the middle of bloom.
A pistachio farmer tells us how he's navigating the climate and market demands. That story coming up, but first, these news headlines. We're learning more about the sale of 2 California ICE detention facilities to the federal government. The Department of Homeland Security will pay $1.5 billion for a facility in San Diego and another in California City in Kern County. But combined, the amount far exceeds the value of the actual real estate. According to our news partner, Cal Matters, the California City location was assessed at $171 million, but DHS will pay $732 million, more than 4 times its worth. Critics argue that purchasing the facilities may give the federal government more protections from state oversight. Residents in Kings and Tulare counties are raising concerns amid plans to build data centers at fairgrounds. KVPR's Israel Cardona Hernandez reports from a public meeting this week in Hanford, where residents asked the city to step in.
City officials in Hanford do not have jurisdiction over the Kings County Fairgrounds, but residents are pushing them to speak out about plans to build data centers there. This comes after the public learned a company has possibly requested to build the centers at the Kings and Tulare County Fairgrounds. Global Stack LLC, the company, described them as emergency resilience systems. And residents are concerned about the type of technology it would bring. Shane Strawn said the city should push back.
You pay for lobbyists in the city. That's for the federal and the state. You guys can use that to your advantage. Put it to work for you.
Cesar Caratachea is a father of a 6-year-old and a Hanford resident. He has public health concerns.
She can't speak for herself. She has autism. My concern is that I don't want my little girl to be breathing in those toxic airs.
This meeting followed others held in Tulare and Kings counties. City officials in Hanford told the public they will look more closely into the concerns. For KVPR News, I'm Israel Cardona Hernandez.
More than a dozen congressional Democrats are urging the FCC to end early review of Walt Disney Company station licenses. Lawmakers are arguing that the review is politically motivated and could threaten TV stations like ABC 30 in Fresno. FCC Chairman Brendan Carr says the review is based on concerns over Disney's internal DEI programs and that Disney is the one politicizing the review. Still, calling for an early review of a station's license is rare. A small community west of Fresno is celebrating a water milestone. The town of Biola is now receiving surface water for the first time. It has historically been dependent only on groundwater supplies. The surface water will be carried from the Herndon Canal and will go into a recharge basin for the community. The canal is managed by the Fresno Irrigation District. The town sits in an area where groundwater supplies have been critically overdrafted over the years.
KVPR's $10,000 drawing is underway. Do your part to support KVPR by purchasing your $100 ticket for a chance to win the grand prize of $10,000. Only 800 tickets will be sold. Other prizes include a 2-night stay in Pismo Beach at the Sandcastle Hotel and $250 to dine at restaurants in your community. Purchase tickets now at kvpr.org/10K.
And now to our main story. Demand for pistachios is booming worldwide, from Dubai-inspired chocolate bars to pistachio cookies and lattes. But here in the Central Valley, growers are worried that this year's pistachio harvest could be smaller than expected. That's after some unexpected weather earlier this spring. KVPR's Samantha Rangel visited an orchard to find out what's at stake.
Just a few months ago, this pistachio orchard in Tulare County seemed to be heading towards a great season.
There was an unprecedented heat wave that took place right in the middle of bloom.
As I walk with farmer Joe Coelho, he remembers those spring temperatures in the 90s. He'll know the impact the heat had when it comes time to harvest.
What will be blank will be if this doesn't fill. So they're blank right now, but I would just classify them as not filled yet. Once I get into mid-June, if it just remains like that for the rest of the summer, that's a blank.
The demand for pistachios has exploded globally. It's been fueled in part by viral food trends like Dubai chocolate and pistachio-filled desserts. Scott Fryer is the vice president of global marketing for the American pistachio growers. He says here in the U.S. in 2024, there were 54 items in the grocery store that mentioned Dubai-style chocolate.
In the year 2025, that increased to 163.
That's why what's happening out on the farms doesn't bode well for this marketing boom. Fryer says the trendiness of pistachios has only added to demand that was already growing before the orchards were hit by the climate whiplash.
There's concern that it could be blank, and we're concerned that we will have a much, much lower than expected harvest this year when we have so much demand and not the supply to meet the demand.
California grows nearly all of the nation's pistachios. Garit Brar is an associate professor of pomology at Fresno State. He focuses on pistachio physiology and horticulture.
Pistachio is a really economically important crop in California, and we produce 99% of the U.S. pistachios. And the U.S. produces roughly 40 to 45% of world's total pistachio production.
It can take years before a pistachio orchard can produce a commercial crop. This means that every season is a long-term investment with zero guarantees. Coelho, the pistachio farmer who took me out to his farm, says that when the long-awaited harvest turned out small, many, like himself, are left with big bills and no easy way to catch up to their typical quota.
Figure if it's $4,000 an acre to farm, a mature planting, I need to make something like 1,400 pounds at normal grower prices to break even.
This is not a common struggle with pistachios, typically a pretty secure crop. But farmers have learned a lot from another tree crop that has seen its share of market challenges: almonds. Farmers don't want to plant too many trees because prices fall and supply outpaces demand. But there's always something to look forward to, and Coelho is thinking well beyond just this year's harvest.
When the industry has had kind of catastrophic loss, the rebound is huge. It's record-setting. So it jumps back significantly.
In a changing climate and fast-moving economy, pistachio farmers are caught in a battle, trying to stay one step ahead of the next bump in the road. For KVPR News, I'm Samantha Rangel.
And Samantha joins me now to talk a little bit more about her reporting. Hey, Sam.
Hey, Sarith.
So based on your story, it seemed like weather was really at the center of it. Can you explain what happens during bloom and why just a couple of really hot days could create such an impact on the harvest?
Yeah, during bloom, pistachio trees are in a sensitive sort of window. The male trees would essentially shed pollen, and the pollen lands on those flowers and to grow some sort of pollen tube. Now, I remember Joe said that there's this hot stretch, mid-90s, for about a week in March, and it hit right in the middle of that bloom period. So when it gets hot that early, the tree's metabolism will slow down, and the pollen tube doesn't necessarily grow. It essentially just kind of shuts off. The trees will be able to form that shell, the outer shell, but there isn't any certainty, like Joe said, that there will be any kernel inside, any pistachio for a consumer to eat. But it was just coincidence, unfortunately, that the heat happened at exactly the wrong moment this past spring season, and that could lead to those blank nuts that he talks about in the story.
And when anything crop-related comes up, water access is always something that we think about. When you spoke with the farmer Joe Coelho, did he mention any concerns about water that he uses for that crop?
Yeah, Joe Coelho talks about a lot of water concerns, actually. He talked about how important it was, of course, for the orchards and the trees to have enough moisture in the soil, right as the trees, wake up and start that bloom in the spring. I mean, of course, trees growing on dry ground is never a good start to any season. So having that water initially is key to, starting on the right foot. But he also talks about, as far as issues, because of curtailments of surface water allocation, there's groundwater pumping. And so he says that they pump water out of the ground, but it tends to cause some issues with the soil. It starts to introduce salinity and infiltration problems that could be pricey to fix in the long term. And it causes a reduced yield overall in some cases. So on top of all of this, the water problems limit some of those planning decisions and whether or not people and growers want to put in new orchards. But definitely the groundwater pumping has been one of the biggest water issues that he and other farmers around the valley have seen lately.
Yeah, definitely a lot to consider when you're talking about farming and planting, and especially with growing pistachios. Now, this is a long-term investment. Why can't farmers just plant more trees if the demand is so high?
I thought the same thing. Even though there's a strong demand now, they can't just continue to plant pistachios without finding some sort of nice balance. For starters, water having those strict regulations already kind of draws that line for farmers. So more trees would of course mean more water usage in the system, and that's already kind of being forced to be cut back because of these regulations. And of course, there's also just high costs up front, the long waits to see that commercial crop come to fruition. And so basically, there's just a lot of different variables that force growers to kind of keep that limit on just how many more new trees they're able to put in. And they can't get too excited because, they plant all these extra pistachios, and years down the road, when they get that commercial crop, they might not be in as high of a demand as they are now.
Yeah, definitely a tough industry. KVPR reporter Samantha Rangel, thank you so much for telling us more about your reporting.
Thank you, Sarith.
And that's today's show. Today's episode was produced by Samantha Rangel, Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado, Jonathan Linden, and KVPR. I'm Sarith Hawk. You can find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
Each story you hear on Planet Money starts with a question. What happens if we refund tariffs? Why are groceries so expensive? At NPR, we stand for your right to be curious, because the forces shaping our world can be hard to see. Follow NPR's Planet Money wherever you get your podcasts and start seeing how the economy really works.